be careful what you do to stand out in that first couple weeks of college. Figure out how to get from ignorance to education. I agreed, but I felt a little nervous walking around the streets in plain sight while it was enough of a crowd that a lot of people started dancing. You ever walk into a party and realize you just don't speak the language, literally or socially? Because ignorance is the natural state of being. And today's lesson is being ignorant isn't your fault, but staying ignorant is. To pick up where we left off last week, we were headed to a party called the Sto-Jo Mixer that night. And it turned out it was pretty cool. For a first college party that was hosted by the administration, it wasn't bad. The party had a DJ, strobe lights, a dance floor, a snack buffet, and probably around 400 students showed up, so I met all sorts of people that night. It was enough of a crowd that a lot of people started dancing, and I liked that because I knew how to dance just well enough that I had fun and wasn't too worried about getting judged for it. Got to do that little party time, we're in college, what is going on? Keep in mind, I wasn't single during that time, so I didn't dance with anyone, but I did my best to mingle and dance around to the music. I actually made it into an article in the QC newspaper for saying the food was good and I got to shake my stuff. Again, be careful what you do to stand out in that first couple weeks of college. But later in the party, someone came up to me and said that he wanted to smoke weed with two of the other new students. And he asked me to walk with them so they had a sober friend to guide them back to campus if we got lost, since it felt a little sketchy to be getting high in public with new friends on our first night in a new city. I agreed, but I felt a little nervous walking around the streets in plain sight while they smoked a joint. I did not want to get in trouble my first full day at Whittier College, especially because I wasn't even smoking. I'll change the names to keep it anonymous, but that smoke walk was how I met Mac D and Thornberry, two guys I'd later end up on a way scarier adventure with. But I'll get to that later. Once they were done smoking and I knew my sober friend services were no longer needed, I made it back to the party pretty quick. Gotta dance around, party time, excellent, yeah. If you get that reference. And when it started to die down for the night, a set of new friends and I went back to one of their rooms to have a frozen popsicle called Otter Pops. And the woman who handed me my first Otter Pop, Rachel Tegenkamp, would eventually act in Carpe Diem as well. Oddly enough, attending that party laid the groundwork for a friend base that stuck with me for years to come. Now, I didn't get in trouble for this because no one caught the weed smokers and I didn't do anything other than introduce myself to people and eat an Otter Pop. However, I was still in a long-distance relationship at the time, like I mentioned earlier, and unfortunately, at the end of the night, I saw that I'd missed a dozen messages from my girlfriend, who was a little worried and unhappy about my choice to socialize at a party, instead of talking to her during the limited time frame that we had to communicate, due to the 8-hour time difference. Long-distance relationships, especially during college, can create a serious conflict of interests, because I didn't want to make her nervous, but I also didn't want to be socially isolated and end up without friends in college. This would only get worse over time, but that's another story. I went to sleep that night in the dorm room with Kay and Lion in the other bunks. It felt a little odd and definitely didn't feel like home yet, but the excitement of being in college offset it a little. The next evening, freshman convocation was unusual at best. We showed up to a dimly lit amphitheater around 7 p.m. on September 3rd, and we each grabbed a candle with a paper circle towards the bottom as we walked in. When we were asked to, each student lit a candle with fire from the same torch, passing the flame from candle to candle, doing our best not to burn each other or ourselves as the wax started to melt. I hope the wind didn't pick up because I figured anyone with long hair would become a fire hazard. Our college's president, Sharon Hertzberger, gave a speech on learning about leadership through service to others. They called this the Sharing the Light of Learning ceremony. It wasn't really what I expected my first 2 days of college to look like, but I think it was successful in bonding us all a little over the shared experiences of attending a party together and participating in this kind of unusual ceremony. But in general, college is about way more than just academics, and Whittier College is one of the most diverse schools in the country. At least when I looked it up, it was the 11th most diverse liberal arts school in the United States. That meant that I was meeting people from very different walks of life in every dorm room, every table at the CI, anywhere I went. I met people from countries I didn't even know existed who spoke languages I'd never heard before and who'd grown up in cultures I'd only briefly read about if I'd known about them at all. And because I was meeting people from all over, I had to learn some new slang terms that I found to be very commonplace at Whittier College. Something wasn't sketchy anymore, it was just sketch. Something wasn't junk or falling apart, it was janky. Crazy? I was just cray, or cray-cray if it was really wild. Something doesn't hurt your feelings anymore, it hits you in the feels. Things aren't ghetto, they're ratchet. Someone isn't ignorant, they're just ignorant. A song isn't just great, the beat slaps and the chorus is fire. Ecstasy pills are often cut with other chemicals, so now they're crushing MDMA crystals into powder and snorting it, calling it Molly and saying it's pure, even if it isn't. If you only have one opportunity to do something, YOLO, you only live once, you gotta do it. You aren't drunk or high, you're lit. The interesting thing here is that, from my understanding, almost every one of those words originates in Black culture, specifically from music or Twitter a lot of the time. However, I wasn't introduced to these words as learning about Black culture. I was introduced to them as important words to know in college. I think it's fascinating how the first step to something jumping from a cultural term or acronym is often through the youth adopting those words as modern vernacular instead of racial vernacular. For example, rapper Anthony Mandingo released the song Do the Ratchet in 1999, and rapper Lil Boosie defined ratchet in 2004 as to be ghetto, real, gutter, nasty. But it didn't reach mainstream until about 8 years after that. But I didn't know any of that. I had to do research into where these words came from to know any of this at all. Being ignorant or ignorant of the world around you is, unfortunately, the natural state of being, and you have to work hard to learn current, accurate information about an ever-changing world. I didn't expect my linguistics to pop out in the US too, but here we are. But for real, in a setting like this, there will be ideas and plans and groups and projects and all sorts of things flying around, and people from various places and backgrounds will be interacting and sharing what they know about the world. It's a place where you have more autonomy than ever before, but it's safer to fail than it ever will be again. So strike while the iron's hot if you go to a college, university, or trade school straight out of high school, and figure out how to get from ignorance to education. Learning to navigate college wasn't just classes, it was about words, cultures, and conversations I didn't even know I was missing. And even though some of those early connections came from parties and slang, they laid the groundwork for everything that came next. Foreshadowing. I found that I got along with one roommate quite well, like I mentioned in the previous episode, but the other one, I didn't. I'll get to this later on, but one big hint is Lion did not like how diverse the college was. But you'll have to tune in next week to hear about how I became a video producer for the college.
Hi, can I order a pizza with everything on it, please?
This is a library.